Hi, Doug. Thanks for opting in to the instructor critique. Um, I have looked over your design a little bit and want to give you some pointers. I really like the colors that you're going with. I like that you have some interesting typefaces. There's a good amount of spacing around the writing, which is interesting. I think one of the things that is really going to help your design overall is I think perhaps you're getting a little bit caught up in having each of these three parts, and as opposed to it reading like a magazine article, it's reading more like maybe a training where you could like click on things and go to a separate place. Like this, I'm assuming isn't the end of this section. It says continued on page 20, continued on page 20. Um, Maybe you did that because you felt like it was too word heavy to have the whole part about overcoming distractions here. Um, it's not really reading like a traditional magazine spread. And so I think that would confuse your readers from a visual perspective. I had to kind of start reading to be able to figure out what was going on because I thought that this was a pull quote, this was a pull quote, and you would go from I started noticing three players' reasons would miss shots to aim correctly. Okay, so you have the correct order of hierarchical flow, like it's going down, your eye is traveling down the page. However, having these this large is denoting to your reader that they are not a part of the main body of your article. So that's where the problem is coming in. So could you do something cool like this, but with actual pull quotes from the articles instead? So maybe you have noticing the three reasons players would miss shots. And then here you have like it's part of the normal body, not aiming correctly, being distracted by the crowd, being fouled while shooting basketball. It continues. It's a nice normal column that reads down the page like that. Then you either take this with a smaller pull quote perhaps, move it down to the bottom third of the page and have maybe one or two sentences. Also, usually you don't ever want your reader to have to read all the way across the page on a magazine spread. Maximum probably is something like this where it's like 2/3 the amount of the page that they need to read across. Let me pull up an example here. So this pull quote, see how it's about 2/3 of the page, but it's really big and it's one sentence. That's going to be about the maximum amount of visual patience that your reader is going to have for following all the way across the page, line after line. That's why it's in columns. So even though you are not doing your body copy in that portion, you're doing something that's a little bit visually different, it's still not going to be easy on the reader. And so for that reason, I would probably encourage you to have something that is less body copy, that is actually a pull quote, and use that instead within this black shape. And then just kind of have it linearly move down the page from what you read to columns like you would normally. You have these images, they look nice. I really like the way you're formatting this page. It looks really cool, but the same thing, this isn't actually the whole article. Part of it is getting cut off and then part of it is getting cut off. So is there a way for you to maybe have these images be a little bit smaller perhaps? Or I might even be okay with you not saying continued on page 20 here, just eliminating that. So it doesn't look so weird to have two continued on page 20 side by side. And then you can just have continued on page 20 over here on the right hand side. So just continue to play around with that. I like the way this looks visually, like it looks like it would be a cool poster, but from a magazine spread perspective, it's losing kind of the flow of the overall article. I like this white space down here at the bottom. For your title here, I really like the colors. I can see where you have this background image coming through, like it's wide over here, but it carries over there. So make sure your shapes are actually touching one another. I don't know exactly what's going on over here, but it's grayer and it's blacker here. So make sure your shapes fully overlap the edge of the page and fully overlap each other. Make sure this pink doesn't have any kind of transparency or anything going on like that. And then that's going to make it how you have the rebounds half and half. That's going to make it a lot cleaner, and it'll look kind of cool that the pink and the black are interrupting it perfectly. Pay attention to tiny things like alignment. See how this black and this pink aren't perfectly aligned here? Make sure they are. And then I'd probably tuck by Eric D. Richards. I'd make that a little bit smaller, maybe right align it. But the rest down here looks good. I like this portion of it. It's just cleaning up these images in the background. Okay, so the main goal is, I think, just trying to consider the reader's experience as they look at this. Visually, it looks really cool. If I wasn't reading it, I would think, oh yeah, that looks great. But it's going to get very confusing. So that's one of the main goals of this assignment, is still to communicate. Communicate in a visual way, but to communicate. The other thing I'm missing, I think, is a text wrap. And so make sure you have some portion of this where you're doing a text wrap around some element. So maybe if you change this shape and you put it down here, you could make it 2/3 of the page or something and have the column wrap around it. All right, or wrap around an image. Most of your images are full bleeds, which I really like. I love full bleeds. Make sure this is actually full bleed. The image on the right stops a little bit too early. And then there's this black shape in the background. Oh, that must be an extension of this. Okay, so just clean up your shapes, make sure all the edges are perfectly aligned. I'd probably go through and take out the footnotes too. Okay, so just consider the reader experience, communicating your message, moving through the columns while keeping the cool design elements that you have. If you make some choices and then are a little bit perplexed about what direction to go after you make those choices, you can always feel free to shoot me an email. I'll look at your second draft and let you know if I have any ideas. All right. Thanks, Doug. You're off to a good start. Really liking your color scheme, your images, and your font selection. So have a good night. Thanks.